About half a mile from the Beaufort Polo Club, the Tomlinsons had a further 900 acres at a farm called Hill Court, on the outskirts of Shipton Moyne, home to the Cat and Custard Pot, another favourite watering hole. It was organically farmed and supported 2 large dairy herds, beef cattle, cereals and nearly 200 polo ponies. This was where William worked as a farmhand for 4 exhausting weeks at the beginning of 2001. On the grounds that he will one day inherit the Duchy of Cornwall with all its tenant farms, his father, who, like his father before him, has long been a champion of the countryside, wanted him to get an understanding of the rural economy and how those hands-on farmers live. It was something he was keen to do. He always loved spending time at the home farm, and David Wilson remembers him as a small child sitting for hours with the animals. But rather than go to a duchy farm, where he'd be the boss's son, he chose instead to work for his friend's parents. It was hard work, getting up at 4 a.m. each day to bring the cows in from the fields and do the milking and the washing down of the milking sheds afterwards and all the other mucky, back-breaking chores that fall to the latest recruit. The only consolation was that he was paid, unlike for everything else he did in his gap year. He got the princely sum of £3.20 an hour. He loved it, particularly the feeling that he was just another guy on the farm. Next came Africa, the final and in many ways best part of the gap year. Africa has a way of getting into people's blood and it had already started to seep into his. He had been there once before and was smitten, as so many people are. It's the sheer size of the continent, the miles of nothingness, the friendly, laughing people, the adventure and the incomparable thrill of seeing wildlife in its natural untouched habitat. He and Harry were taken to Kenya by old family friends, the Van Cutsums, shortly after their mother's death. Hugh Van Cutsum had been at Cambridge with Prince Charles and he and his wife, Emily, had been close friends of his ever since. Their 4 sons, Edward, Hugh, Nicholas and William, were almost like brothers to William and Harry, all but William, older than them. And although there was a brief rift in the relationship between Charles and Hugh and Emily because of Camilla, the children remained firm friends. Emily had been particularly good at scooping up the boys after Diana died and they had spent many happy days at their beautiful home in Norfolk. When William went to university, he gave them his black Labrador, Widgeon, to look after. Their guide in Kenya was Geoffrey Kent, founder of the luxury travel company Abercrombie & Kent, a polo player, adventurer and a friend of the Prince of Wales. He had grown up on a farm in the Aberdare Highlands of Kenya and been educated in Nairobi. He knew the country like the back of his hand and his company specialized in upmarket safaris to the most breathtaking parts of the continent. He took them to Lewa, a game reserve on the northern foothills of Mount Kenya, which is as breathtaking as anywhere in Africa. The skies are big, the earth is red and scorched, the smells and the sounds are like nowhere else in the world and at night the stars are so bright and so close you feel you could reach up and stir them with your hand. And the place is bristling with wildlife. Lewa was owned by the Craig family, whom Geoffrey knew well. He introduced them to his royal party. Ian Craig, like Geoffrey, was second generation. His father had gone out to Kenya from England in the early 1920s to farm cattle and owned about 35,000 acres of land, where game roamed freely. Poaching had always been a problem in Africa. Elephants were killed for their tusks and rhinos for their horns, but in the late 1980s it became an epidemic. In 10 years the estimated number of black rhino had dropped from 20,000 to fewer than 300. But they had a champion in a remarkable conservationist and philanthropist called Anna Mers. She persuaded Ian's father to give over part of his ranch to a rhino sanctuary. Together they worked to track and capture every remaining wild rhino in northern Kenya and relocate them to the sanctuary for breeding and safekeeping. Over the next 10 years it grew until the Craigs decided to give over the whole property to the rhinos and enclosed it with high, electrified fencing. Since then, the government and neighboring landowners have added to it, bringing the total acreage to 61,000. It was renamed the Lewa Wildlife Conservancy and has become a flagship not only for Kenya but for the whole of Africa, and a catalyst for conservation. A number of endangered species have sanctuary there. including the Grevy's zebra, Sitatunga, and oryx antelope. This is one of the best times of day to spot animals, before the sun comes up, and with it the heat, when they find themselves a shady spot to rest in after a night's hunting. Another good time is late afternoon. And because the animals don't see jeeps as a threat, provided no one makes a noise or a sudden movement, it's possible to get very close. William loved it. But more exciting still was when Charlie Wheeler, one of Ian Craig's colleagues on Lewa, a fellow conservationist and another second-generation Kenyan, took them walking through the bush for a day's expedition on foot, with camels. Armed with a rifle, he took the lead. Everyone who leaves the safety of the camp, whether on 4 wheels or foot or horse, goes with an armed ranger just in case they meet an angry buffalo or get between a rhino and her baby. On this occasion they had 2 armed PPOs as well, although their training was more to deal with would-be kidnappers and assassins than hungry hyenas or malevolent bull elephants. Everything needed for the perfect lunch was carried on the camels, and when they stopped at noon in the middle of nowhere, a makeshift camp was conjured up in the bush and lunch was served as it might have been in a 5-star hotel, with a troop of Africans to prepare and serve it. On their way back, the sun suddenly set, and in Africa there is no twilight. They went from sunshine to moonlight and unexpectedly walked into a herd of elephants. It's the sort of experience that either thrills or terrifies. Harry, aged 12, was hanging on to Charlie's shirt but William was exhilarated. They rendezvoused with some vehicles and returned safely to camp, but the day and the holiday as a whole made a big impression on William and inspired a determination to go back. When plotting his gap year he contacted Ian Craig and asked whether there was any work he might usefully do on Lewa. He planned to go first to Botswana, which Mark Dyer knew well, but then wanted to return to the place he had so fallen in love with, but he made it absolutely clear he did not want a joyride. Ian assured him he would be usefully employed and welcomed him with open arms. Charlie Mayhew is the founder and chief executive of Tusk Trust, a charity set up in 1990, dedicated to halting the destruction of Africa's wildlife. 5 years later he hooked up with Lua, where the guiding philosophy so perfectly matched his own, and he became good friends with Ian Craig and his family. Their concern was not only the wildlife. It was also for the local communities and the need to educate them so that they could appreciate and manage the assets they had and profit from the tourism they brought. William heard about Tusk during this visit, and it was one of the first charities of which he agreed to become patron. Charlie happened to be at Lewa the day William and Mark, shrouded in secrecy, arrived in March 2001. He was there with Ronnie Wood, the Rolling Stones guitarist and painter, plus a photographer and a journalist from the Daily Mail. Ronnie was a patron of Tusk and had painted a series of wildlife pictures at Lewa to raise money for the charity. The publication wanted to see Ronnie in situ and so Charlie had taken them all. Ronnie stayed with Ian and his wife, Jane, while the journalists were accommodated in a lodge. Before I got there, says Charlie, Ian sent me an email or phoned and said, "You are leaving on such and such a date and you will be gone by 11 o'clock, won't you?" This was so unlike Ian to be so precise, very un-Kenyan. I said, "Yes, okay, we'll be gone." I was taking Ronnie up north for more interviews. When we arrived, Ian apologized and said, "You might have thought me a bit odd, but we've got William coming and the fact you've got a Daily Mail journalist in tow put everyone into a spin." And as William flew in, we flew out and the poor journalist never realized that he had the biggest scoop under his nose. You can see exactly why William has become so close to Ian Craig, Charlie said. I wouldn't say he's a father figure but they have a very close relationship. He's very down to earth and has a lovely family, a wife and 2 children. They've all become close friends and what's interesting about William and his friends is how closely guarded they are and protective over that relationship and the privacy, and one can't help but admire it. William was much more relaxed when he came back the second time, says Charlie Wheeler. On that first trip his mother had just died and he was very quiet and reserved. This time he was a normal boy, and was treated like all the kids. Charlie has 2 sons of his own of much the same age and his late wife, Carol, like most Kenyans, black and white, was completely unfazed by the royal tag. It meant nothing to them, which is at the heart of why Africa is so special to both William and Harry. It's the anonymity that they both crave. To her, William was just another boy, who should pull his weight, and she made no distinction between any of them. While William was there, a big bull elephant had to be captured and transferred to another national park. He was causing huge damage on Lua, breaking trees and being generally destructive because of the limited space. It was a major event in the local community and dozens of people were involved and lots of photographs were taken because the Craigs always liked to record these transfers. William was part of the operation and remarked that for the first time in his life, the cameras were not focused on him. That was a major part of the magic of Africa for William. It was somewhere he could go where no one knew who he was, and those that did, didn't care. He was just another guy, and according to Charlie, he was in paradise. Lua is a very dynamic place. There's always something exciting going on. It's thrilling for an adult, let alone a kid, and there's an element of danger. Yet it's not just fun for fun's sake, it's doing something worthwhile. A couple of monuments remain to mark William's 2 months in Kenya in the spring of 2001. First, he built the bird hide at Lua. The initial attempt sank into the swamp, much to the amusement of the Kenyans. His second attempt survives to this day. He also built a flying fox, otherwise known as a fufi slide, across a deep, death-defying gully at Lake Rutundu in Mount Kenya National Park, a 2-hour drive south of Lua. It is one of the remotest places on the planet, accessed through several miles of single-track, and at times trackless, forest and scrub. The sort of place where if you slipped off the path, easily done, or ran out of fuel, you might not be found for months. But when you finally reach the lake and the 2-hut lodge above it, you realize it was worth the journey. It is one of the most breathtaking places, and because of the high altitude, literally breathtaking. It was also the place where William took Kate Middleton, and his mother's diamond and sapphire ring, in 2010 and proposed marriage to her. He took her there no doubt to show off his amazing piece of handiwork with the flying fox. Or perhaps the place where he actually presented the ring, we shall never know exactly, was at Lake Alice, another 10,000 feet higher and an even more heavenly place and well worth the climb. What history does not relate is whether Kate risked life and limb and crossed the ravine in William's flying fox, which has a large safety sign beside it, widely disregarded, saying that it is for luggage only, or whether she took the safe option, and walked down to the bottom of the ravine and up the other side. It was in Tortle that he agreed to do a dreaded photo call. The media had agreed to stay away while he was in Chile, in return for decent access and good photo opportunities at some stage during the 11 weeks. Colleen Harris, who after Sandy Henny's departure became press secretary, kept the numbers to the bare minimum, which she knew would work best. One television cameraman, one stills photographer and a reporter from the Press Association who conducted the interview. Mark Dyer traveled out with them. It turned out to be a public relations triumph. Compelling photographs of William filled the newspapers for 2 days and the film footage ran on the TV news. He was praised for his humility and willingness to muck in with fellow volunteers and for his caring touch, as he was seen on all fours cleaning the communal loo, and making porridge that he declared was the worst porridge he had ever tasted in his life. "Here you are actually making a difference to other people's lives," he said. It went down a storm.